after a Democrat prevailed in a special Senate election in Alabama, a ruby red Republican state. President Trump offered on Wednesday a truncated and misleading account of his role in the race. Mr. Trump had endorsed Roy S. Moore, the Republican who was accused of sexual misconduct by several women and was narrowly defeated on Tuesday night by Doug Jones, a Democrat and former prosecutor. By early Wednesday morning, the president sought to distance himself from the loss by reminding his Twitter followers that he had doubts about Mr. Moore months ago. Back then, Mr. Trump supported Luther Strange, the Republican who was appointed to fill the Senate seat vacated by Jeff Sessions, now the Attorney General. The reason I originally endorsed Luther Strange and his numbers went up mightily is that I said Roy Moore will not be able to win the general election, Mr. Trump wrote in a Twitter post. I was right. Roy worked hard but the deck was stacked against him! But that is a highly amended account of the president's efforts in the Alabama race. Mr. Trump officially endorsed Mr. Strange on August 8 as he ran against Mr. Moore and several other Republicans in the primary election a week later. At the time, Mr. Moore was leading the Republican field by an average of 6 points, according to polls aggregated by RealClearPolitics.com. In a runoff election after the primary, Mr. Moore led Mr. Strange by an average of 9 points. If Alabama voters were unmoved by the president's pick in the primary, Mr. Trump himself seemed similarly unenthusiastic. At a September 22 campaign rally for Mr. Strange, Mr. Trump mused that he had backed the wrong man. I'll be honest, I might have made a mistake, Mr. Trump said, predicting correctly that Mr. Strange's loss would reflect poorly on him and calling both candidates good men. Moments later, however, he said Mr. Strange would be more competitive in the general election against a Democrat than Mr. Moore would. Luther will definitely win, he continued. Roy has a very good chance of not winning in the general election. Flying back to Washington after that rally, however, Mr. Trump reportedly raged against his political aide for urging him to back Mr. Strange, given the president's misgivings. After Mr. Moore prevailed in the runoff, Mr. Trump deleted several tweets promoting Big Luther. Firehouse Strategies, the Republican research firm, found that Mr. Trump's endorsement and active campaigning for Mr. Strange had absolutely no impact on the ballot. On September 27, Mr. Trump threw his support behind Mr. Moore in a tweet. Spoke to Roy Moore of Alabama last night for the first time. Sounds like a really great guy who ran a fantastic race. He will help to sign them AGA! The president continued to stand by Mr. Moore, a conservative former judge, after several women accused the candidate of making sexual or romantic overtures toward them as teenagers. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen, Mr. Trump said on November 21, adding, but I can't tell you. You don't need somebody who's soft on crime, like Jones. Mr. Trump offered a strong endorsement of Mr. Moore last week. On Friday, Mr. Trump campaigned for Mr. Moore in Pensacola, Florida, where he urged neighboring Alabamians to get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Asked last week about his decision to endorse Mr. Moore, Mr. Trump predicted, I think he's going to do very well.